"Thank you ever so much for your help, Miss Elizabeth," Mrs. Nichols, the Netherfield housekeeper, said. Elizabeth had known Mrs. Nichols since she was a child. She and Jane had often accompanied their grandmother when she visited the estate's previous owners. At that time, Mrs. Nichols had been one of the maids, but her sister had a similar position at Longbourn, where the Bennets lived. "You are welcome, Mrs. Nichols. I still think she needs to be seen by the apothecary, but I have tended to the injury as best I can," Elizabeth replied. She had encountered the injured maid as she descended the back staircase a short time ago. Since no one had responded to her call for more cold water for her sister Jane, she had gone to fetch it herself. If not for her sister's illness, Elizabeth would not have been at Netherfield, as she had no affinity for most of Netherfield's residents. In the last month, she had encountered the Netherfield party more than a dozen times. Each occasion only confirmed her first impression of the party. Mr. Bingley, the present master, was amiable and open. Miss Bingley and her sister Mrs. Hurst felt themselves above their company. Mr. Hurst, the husband of the elder sister, was concerned only with food and drink. Mr. Darcy proved the most enigmatic of the party. From the first, Elizabeth had thought him haughty and cold, an impression fixed when he dismissed her as tolerable at the Meryton Assembly. Since then, little in his behaviour had served to alter that opinion. At gatherings, he was seen most often on the fringes, moving with aloof reserve, rarely condescending to speak with anyone outside his own party. However, Elizabeth had noticed his tendency to appear to be listening to her conversations of late. She could not understand why, particularly since he found her not handsome enough to tempt him, a stinging description she had been unable to forget. Granted, he had asked her to dance at Lucas Lodge a se'nnight before, but that was only because Sir William Lucas had urged him to do so. Still, his manner had confused her since she was unable to identify his purpose for always listening to her instead of participating in conversations. "Miss Bingley refused to allow me to call for Mr. Jones," Mrs. Nichols said, returning Elizabeth to the present. Elizabeth pursed her lips. No doubt she wished to keep others from knowing she caused such an injury to a maid. The girl will need the evening off, likely the morning as well, and she must be careful with that hand for some time. If she develops a fever or red streaks appear around the wound, it will indicate an infection, and Mr. Jones will certainly need to see her then. I know the cook has a good poultice that will help, but still, I will do what I can. Perhaps if I approach the master instead." Mrs. Nichols trailed off as she heard the floor creak outside the library where they were treating the maid. The library was little used by the current occupants of the house, since Mr. Bingley was not a reader, and Mr. Darcy had found the selection lacking, preferring to read the books he had brought instead. "Pardon me," came the deep, solemn voice of Mr. Darcy. He looked between the three women and noted the bandages around the maid's wrist and the evidence that Elizabeth had been helping to care for her. "Is the apothecary needed? I can send a footman to town if necessary. One of my servants would not mind going if Netherfield cannot spare one." "Miss Bingley refused to send for one," Elizabeth said tartly, her anger evident in her tone at the girl's treatment. Darcy frowned upon hearing that. "What happened?" he asked, his brow furrowed in concern as he looked between the three. "Apparently—" The startled glances from the maid and Mrs. Nichols caused Elizabeth to stop and leave out what they obviously did not wish to be heard. She frowned, recalling how difficult it had been to get the whole story from the maid in the first place, but chose to abide by their obvious wishes.